The first receipt wasn't hidden. Not really. It was just carelessly crumpled beneath the owner's manual in Julia's glove box, stuck between expired tire rotation coupons and a lint-coated granola bar. I wasn't looking for anything, just updating the registration papers. But there it was, thin paper, gold-trimmed logo, a name I recognized from a billboard downtown, the Ardell Hotel. Boutique, quiet, costly. The date hit first, 2 months ago. The weekend Julia said she was with her sister up in Sonoma for a spa reset. Her words. I'd even packed her overnight bag. She told me to leave room for a new robe she planned to buy. This receipt had no mention of a spa, no robe, no second guest, just the room type. Executive balcony suite. 1 king bed. 2 nights. Paid in full. Under a name I didn't recognize. I put it on the passenger seat and stared at it for a long time. I didn't know what I was looking for. Some misprint, some missing context. I told myself I'd ask her tonight. A casual question, no accusation. But when she came home, the words slipped from my throat before they ever left my mouth. She looked rested, happy. She kissed my cheek and started boiling pasta like it was just another Monday. I slid the receipt into my jeans pocket. Never said a word. The second one showed up 2 weeks later, under the driver's seat while I was vacuuming crumbs. Same hotel. Same suite type. Different weekend. Different name on the billing, Michael B. Again, not hers. Not mine. That one went straight into my desk drawer, next to the first. By the time I found the third, I had stopped believing in accidents. It was stuck behind the backseat organizer, barely visible. Thomas R., this time. Same room, same Ardell Hotel. That made 3 receipts, 3 weekends, 3 different male names. Julia wasn't careless. She was confident. Confident enough to leave behind proof because she didn't think anyone was looking. And maybe I wasn't. Not before now. That night, she made risotto. She danced barefoot on the kitchen tile while the stereo played Bill Evans. She moved with that soft energy she always had after travel, hair still damp from a shower, wine glass in hand, that sleepy contentment that used to reassure me. I remember thinking how good she was at slipping right back into this life, how easily she smiled while things cracked beneath her. We watched a movie in bed. She curled into me. I could smell the lavender oil on her skin. I stared at the ceiling fan and thought about the king-sized bed at the Ardell. I didn't sleep. At 2:17 a.m., I got out of bed, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it plainly, Things That Don't Fit. Inside went scanned copies of each receipt, a Google Maps bookmark of the hotel, a saved copy of the room layout from their website. I even made notes about the suite amenities. Fireplace. Rainfall shower. Ideal for romantic getaways. The next morning, I watched her pour coffee and talk about her Pilates class like the world hadn't just shifted under our feet. I nodded, asked if she wanted almond milk again. She smiled, thanked me, and that was the moment it became real. It wasn't the receipts. It was how seamless she was, how entirely undisturbed by the lie she was living. Later that afternoon, I checked her calendar app. It still said, Sister Spa Weekend, copied and pasted across the same 3 weekends. She hadn't even changed the label. I took a screenshot, saved it to the folder. That night, I stood in the driveway, staring at her car. Not at the exterior, but at what it had become, a vault of overlooked truths. I remember thinking, this isn't suspicion. This is evidence. I didn't confront her. Not then. Not when I watched her cross the hallway in a robe she said was a gift from her sister. Not when she pulled me into bed and rested her head on my chest like we were untouched. Because I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to understand, quietly, completely. I started a note on my phone, labeled it Patterns. I typed the hotel dates, the names, her excuses. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just built the foundation of something stronger than pain, a plan. A pattern doesn't reveal itself until you step far enough back to see it without emotion. That was the hardest part. Shoving my feelings into the margins so I could see clearly. Julia was careful, but not invisible. She left just enough threads. I started with the hotel. The Ardell wasn't a place people stumbled into. It was curated luxury, velvet lounges, marble baths, executive-style restraint. Their website boasted privacy for discerning guests, whatever that meant. No spa, no wellness packages. Just 5-star rooms starting at over $600 a night. I scrolled through the gallery for 20 minutes. One image stopped me cold, the exact suite layout from the receipts, with champagne chilling on the end table. I bookmarked it, added the link to the folder. Then I checked our shared credit card statements. Nothing. Not a single charge matching the Ardell, or even the downtown neighborhood. Not under her name or mine. Either someone else was footing the bill, or she was paying through an account I didn't know existed. I stayed calm. Each answer bred a deeper question, and that kept me grounded. I told myself, you're not reacting. You're recording. That's when I remembered the name she dropped casually 2 months ago. This jazz guy I met at the gallery opening. We were making dinner, and she said he reminded her of a young Herbie Hancock. I didn't even flinch back then. Just nodded, handed her the salt. I'd filed him under irrelevant artistic friends, the kind she often met at fundraisers or museum nights. I didn't even remember his name, but I remembered the way she'd laughed when describing how he hated synthetic saxophone tones. It had felt harmless. Now it didn't. That night, while Julia was in the shower, I took her phone. My hands didn't shake. I'd done this 100 times before, for calendar syncs, lost Bluetooth pairings, Spotify downloads. It wasn't suspicious. I updated her OS. With the new version came permissions, tightened settings, yes, but also a backdoor. I knew a tracking app that cloaked itself inside the Find My network, a ghost among approved services. It took 5 minutes to install. I tested it, verified the signal, labeled her device Julia Personal. The next morning, she said she'd be visiting her sister again. Quick trip, she said. One night, just us girls. She kissed my forehead, told me not to wait up. I smiled, told her to say hi from me. Then I watched the dot on the screen. Not north toward her sister's place. Not the suburbs. It stopped downtown. Precisely 10 blocks from the Ardell Hotel, but not quite there. A converted building in the old textile district. Exposed brick, rooftop gardens, tight streets. I knew the spot. Had driven past it for years. A loft building now mostly studios and co-ops. The tracking app pulsed. She stayed there for 3 hours. Then moved 2 blocks west. Then returned. I screenshotted the route. Saved it to the folder. Added a tag. Sister trip, 0% match. That was the night the space between us turned clinical. Julia returned home the next day around noon. Her makeup was minimal. Hair loose. She carried a paper bag with a handmade candle, said her sister had started making them as a side hustle. I asked to smell it. She held it to my nose. Cedar and citrus. It was nice. She sat beside me on the couch and scrolled through her phone like nothing was off. Like she hadn't just vanished into another man's apartment. Like she didn't know her lie had been disassembled and filed. She reached for my hand. I let her take it. In my other hand, inside my pocket, I tapped the tracking app closed. Not because I was done, but because I was just beginning. She told me she was visiting her sister again. Birthday dinner, she said over her shoulder while adjusting a gold clasp on her necklace. We'll probably drink too much and I'll crash there. Don't wait up. Her voice was light, familiar, framed with the kind of casual affection that used to lull me into trust. But that voice didn't work anymore. The GPS dot on my screen confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't heading north toward her sister's cul-de-sac. She was drifting west, downtown. The dot stopped near the Arts District, the same loft building from last week. A converted warehouse with soft lighting and rooftop herb gardens. I sat on the edge of our bed and stared at the screen for a long time before moving. An hour later, I parked 2 blocks away, next to a construction site half wrapped in black tarp. I kept my engine off, the windows cracked. The street was busy enough to stay anonymous. I watched the entrance. At 8:57 p.m., Julia appeared. She wasn't alone. He walked beside her, the same man I'd seen before. Late 30s, maybe, with a loosely groomed beard and that steady disheveled look that creative types wear like armor. He carried himself like someone used to being watched but not questioned. She was laughing, loud, open, genuine. The kind of laugh that used to belong to late-night drives and quiet Sunday mornings with me. It wasn't just her hand in his. It was the way she leaned toward him. As if gravity had shifted. They didn't rush. He kissed her hand, the kind of gesture that doesn't come from impulse but habit. Her smile softened, turned inward, like she was home. I raised my phone and snapped 3 shots. Not rushed, not voyeuristic, measured. The kind you study later. One of them exiting the building. One as he kissed her hand. one of the license plate as he helped her into a slate gray Audi. I didn't follow immediately. I waited, logged the time, 9:06 p.m., and checked nearby businesses. A quick search confirmed what I guessed, 3 high-end restaurants within walking distance. She'd mentioned one last month, a place with truffle risotto and live cello music. I drove there slowly. Their car was parked 2 blocks from the restaurant's valet drop. I parked across the street. Through the front windows, I spotted them. Table near the back, 2 wine glasses already sweating in their stems. Julia leaned in, chin propped on one hand, listening like she used to when I talked about architecture drafts and late-stage design. She was present. More present than she had been in our home for months. I didn't linger. I took 2 more photos through the glass, then walked back to the car and drove home. Inside the quiet of our house, I moved like a ghost. Her scent still lingered in the hallway, and the kitchen light had been left on, casting soft shadows across the countertops. I poured myself a glass of water, stood there in the kitchen where we used to dance, and thought about how easily she moved between lives. I opened my laptop. The folder, Things That Don't Fit, now had 3 subfolders: hotel, loft, timeline. I added the evening's photos, timestamp notes, and GPS coordinates. I began a separate document labeled Evan, Studio ID. It didn't take long to confirm his identity. Evan Collins, local photographer, known for moody portraiture, stark natural light, and a series on urban isolation that had gone mildly viral. He had a website, a LinkedIn, and a gallery profile. One photo showed him at the very building I'd staked out, arm around Julia, both smiling at an opening night. He wasn't a secret. He was a sanctioned version of her world, someone she could name without consequence. That made him more dangerous. He wasn't the lie. He was part of the story she curated. I backed up the images, encrypted the folders, and added a passcode. That night, Julia came home late. She slid into bed without a word, kissed the back of my shoulder like always. I pretended to be asleep. Her breathing evened out in minutes. Mine didn't. She thought I didn't know. She thought this was just another performance. But the thing about masks, they only work if the audience keeps clapping. I'd stopped clapping. Now I was watching the stage collapse. Most men want the truth to be small. One affair. One mistake. One night. Something they can burn down in one confrontation and pretend the ashes make a clean floor. I wanted that too. But what I found was something different. Something layered, practiced. Not one version of betrayal, but a stage play with rotating leads. Julia wasn't cheating. She was casting. It started with the receipts. Each name, Michael B., Thomas R., and now Evan Collins, wasn't a mistake or a shadow identity. They were real men. I mapped them out like case files. Michael B. turned out to be a corporate consultant from Austin. I traced him through a LinkedIn hit, tagged in an old conference photo with Julia from last year. I remembered the night she told me about the team retreat at Lake Tahoe. She'd come home with branded pens and a branded smile. Said the team lead had made a clumsy pass at her. I told him I was married, she'd said with a laugh. Apparently, she hadn't said it convincingly enough. The suite he'd booked matched one of the receipts. His name was on a panelist schedule from that weekend. Julia wasn't listed, but photos from the event's Instagram showed her in the background, cocktail in hand, standing beside him. I added it to the folder. Thomas R. was harder. No last name in full. Just a partial charge from an art gallery transaction that pinged my memory. Julia once brought home a sculpture, abstract metal, uncomfortable angles, and told me. Thomas helped me pick it out. She'd mentioned him as a friend from a gallery she'd volunteered at. Quiet, soft-spoken. Kind of like a sad professor, she joked. A reverse image search led me to a tagged group photo, an exhibit called Forms of Memory. Julia stood beside him, arms barely touching. Not a couple, at least not in that frame, but familiar. His name was listed on a thank you placard. He wasn't a stranger. He was a collaborator. Then came Evan, the photographer. The man with the hand kiss and the rooftop studio. Each man, I realized, had a version of Julia that didn't intersect with mine. With Michael, the consultant, she was sharp and professional, co-hosting panels, offering insights about behavioral branding. He posted a podcast episode featuring her under a different last name. She sounded crisp, corporate, flawless. With Thomas, she was introspective, artistic. She left soft comments on his posts about color theory and grief in sculpture. She wasn't loud there, just present. Gentle. With Evan, she was wild, open, laughing. She appeared in his Instagram stories, untagged but unmistakable, dancing at gallery openings, sipping red wine, tucked under his arm. They didn't know about each other. Not directly. Not publicly. But they each knew a Julia I'd never met. And me? I wasn't part of the rotation. I was the backdrop, the anchor, the one who handled the mortgage while she curated personas like mood boards. I stood in the kitchen that night, staring at our refrigerator. On it were photos of us at a friend's wedding. Her eyes crinkled, my hand at her waist. Behind those eyes, she'd already built other lives. I murmured it aloud, just to hear the shape of it. They all think they're the main character. I'm not even in her script. I didn't sleep that night. I updated the folder, created individual dossiers. I laid them side by side and saw it all. The rehearsed charm, the adaptive language, the perfectly segmented weekends. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the careful crafting of parallel lives, all of them real to someone. She didn't love one man. She loved being adored in different languages. The betrayal should have stopped at the hotel doors, at the jazz bar, at the kiss on the hand. But it didn't. It followed me to work. It started with a withdrawal. Not from our joint account. Those had been quiet since I began tracking, but from something deeper. A client. David, my longest-standing business partner, texted me on a Monday. Hey, why is Marcus pulling out of the incubator proposal? You didn't even pitch yet, right? I hadn't. Marcus Langston was a potential investor I'd been grooming for months. His interest was cautious but sincere. We'd been scheduling a meeting since February. I called Marcus directly. He was polite, almost embarrassed. I thought you guys weren't aligned anymore, he said. Julia told me the framework had shifted. She said you were exploring other verticals? Julia? I asked. He hesitated. Yeah. She said she's working with you on the coaching side of things. That she's managing early-stage support for founders. There it was. The soft fall of a lie that had been polished and rolled beneath my feet. I ended the call calmly, thanked him, then went to the Secretary of State's business search portal. 10 minutes later, I found it. Echelon Coaching and Strategy, LLC. Registered to Julia M. Filed 2 months ago. Address listed. My business suite. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to make the pieces behave. But they didn't. Julia hadn't just created a company behind my back. She'd used my professional address, my investor contacts, my pitch materials. I found the pitch deck, my pitch deck, sent from a Gmail account under a stylized variant of her name. The file was renamed, the branding changed, but the structure was identical. My words, my frameworks, my numbers. She hadn't stolen a moment. She'd stolen infrastructure. Worse, she'd positioned herself as a consultant, a bridge between me and the people I'd spent years building trust with. She took meetings, offered advice, collected support fees, as she called them, and I had no idea. I started calling contacts, quietly, carefully, asking subtle questions, confirming timelines, mapping where my name had been used without my voice. Within 3 days, the damage was clear. 4 investor contacts had been approached without my knowledge. 2 confirmed she'd shown them early versions of my deck. 1 had paid her a strategic consulting fee. 4. Preliminary alignment. She had branded the effort as a joint initiative, emphasizing that I was in transition. She sold me, repackaged, misrepresented, and branded it under support. The next morning, I sat with David over coffee and showed him everything. His face tightened as he scrolled. She's not just freelancing, he said. She's extracting and burning your trust on the way out. I spent the rest of the week severing. I contacted the business registry, filed a cease and desist, notified every investor on our radar that Echelon Coaching had no affiliation with our firm, blacklisted the LLC from all future incubator projects, quietly updated my attorney. Julia came home Friday with takeout and new wine. She kissed my cheek. Thought you needed a break from spreadsheets. I thanked her, took the wine, smiled like a man who hadn't just shut down her secret career. She poured 2 glasses, asked about my day. I told her it was productive, and then, for the first time since the first receipt, I began to feel something that wasn't sadness or rage. I felt control. The kitchen was quiet when she walked in. I had set the table, not for dinner, but for reckoning. No candles, no pretense. Just a manila folder spread open like a wound, documents arranged with surgical precision, 3 hotel receipts, GPS printouts, photos from outside the loft, the pitch deck side by side with her rebranded version, a printout of the LLC registration, an email from Marcus, and a spreadsheet of financial transfers labeled consulting fees, misappropriated contacts. She froze. Her keys landed too hard on the counter. The clink echoed. I didn't look up. I let the silence hold. What is this? I didn't answer right away. I just tapped the corner of the receipt on top. She took a step closer. Seriously, Mark, what is all this supposed to be? It's everything. She laughed, short and sharp, like someone had kicked her from behind. Are you spying on me? No, I said, calm, steady. I was verifying a pattern. She moved toward the table and her face changed when she saw the names. Evan, Michael, Thomas. Her mouth opened slightly. She didn't speak. Her fingers touched one photo, then retracted like it burned. I can explain, she said softly, too softly. You're going to try, I corrected. She stared at me for a long moment, then sat, slowly, like gravity had increased in the room. It wasn't about you, she started. I didn't react. Julia reached for the LLC form, her fingers grazing the paper like it might disappear if she touched it too hard. This wasn't meant to hurt your business, she said, voice low, almost careful. I wanted to build something of my own. You never saw me as a partner in that world. I tilted my head slightly, the movement slow, deliberate. So you used my clients? My name? My office address? The questions weren't loud, just stripped of softness. She started to answer, then faltered. Her hand moved to her forehead, pressing into it as if she could physically push the guilt back in. It wasn't, she began, then stopped. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I said, each word flat and final, like closing a door she'd never reopen. She tried a new angle. The men, those were mistakes. Complicated ones. I was figuring things out. No, I said, sharper this time. You were curating. You created entire versions of yourself. The gallery girl. The executive partner. The muse. You weren't figuring anything out. You were performing. Her shoulders dropped. You didn't cheat, I said quietly. You constructed versions of yourself and lived inside them. I just happened to be the one with the mortgage. She looked up at me then, tears glassing her eyes, but the expression came too late. It couldn't undo what had already been set in motion. I kept my voice steady. The lawyers have been contacted. The accounts are being split. All investor damage has been managed. Your name has been removed from all professional documentation. I paused only to let the next part settle. You'll be receiving a cease and desist related to echelon coaching by the end of the week. Her voice cracked in a whisper, barely formed. You can't. I already did, I said, and there was no anger left in it, just execution. She stared at me, the realization dawning slowly. This wasn't a plea forgiveness scene. This wasn't a salvaging. This was closure in motion. I made mistakes, she said, voice breaking. I nodded. And now they have consequences. She looked down at the table, at the life she'd compartmentalized into parallel fantasies. For the first time in a long while, she looked small. Not weak, just cornered by the truth. When she finally left the table, she didn't slam the door. She moved slowly, silently. The silence she once filled with jazz now held the weight of reality. And I didn't stop her. The audit arrived 2 weeks later. My lawyer called first. Said the state business registry had issued a subpoena for records connected to a recent LLC, Echelon Coaching. That wasn't surprising. What was surprising were the flags, fraudulent invoices, applications for state-level innovation grants using my business's EIN number, backdated approvals signed in my name, my signature copied and reused my signature across multiple forms without my consent. Julia hadn't just stolen my ideas, she'd repurposed my professional credentials for her own ventures. My legitimacy. She hadn't created something new, she'd built a ghost company on the foundation of my name, and she'd used that illusion to court clients, partners, and funding. I sat at my desk and read through the documents forwarded by the state. One grant application listed Julia as Senior Advisor to Mark R. I had never seen the form, never approved the language. But there it was, submitted 3 months prior. Attached to it was a letterhead stolen from my design templates. I traced the metadata. The file had been created at 2:12 a.m., the same night she told me she was Up late editing a blog post for a friend. There was no blog. Just strategy. Just theft. I submitted a sworn statement. Provided the digital timeline. My lawyer submitted a formal complaint and began liaising with legal authorities about the misuse of documentation. The fallout was instant. Julia was fired from the nonprofit where she'd worked part-time. A conflict of interest report cited ongoing investigations into fraudulent activity and reputational risk. She was removed from a pending B2B mentorship panel. Her consulting LLC was delisted from every affiliated network within a week. A week later, someone leaked part of the story to a local forum. A vague post, not naming her, but painting enough of the picture. Some people build entire identities out of other people's lives. I didn't know I was one of many. I didn't know she stole someone else's name. It was posted by Evan. The thread spiraled. Half sympathy, half suspicion. That night, an envelope arrived at my office. No return address. Inside, a single item, a cocktail napkin from the jazz bar downtown, the one where she'd said she first met Miles, the man who loved obscure vinyl. On it, in her handwriting, 4 words. It was real, sometimes. I stared at the ink. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I folded it carefully, slipped it into a new envelope, and added 1 page. State of California. Notice of Business Fraud Investigation. Case 4987A. I sealed it. Mailed it to her last known address. Later that evening, I took a walk. No destination. Just movement. The air had that dry sharpness of a late spring dusk. On the way back, I passed a city trash bin and reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the date jar. We'd made it 2 years into our marriage, filled with folded notes, scribbled during better times. Museum then sushi. Picnic with no phones. Watch the worst movie in the bargain bin. And one fluttered out before I dropped it in. It said, "Be honest, even when it's hard." I watched it catch the wind, tumble once, and vanish beneath the wheels of a passing bus. That was the last piece of her I let go.